All right, make sure I select record so we record everything for us here. Okay, so did everything go well this morning with John, besides a couple of accidental system crashes on a computer that unfortunately we can't control?
Yes, everything's going.
Perfect, fantastic. Okay, so I don't think we really need to go too much further into detail with this again. So simply our COVID policy here at DITA. Once you are in Ottawa, it sounds like very likely that once you arrive in Ottawa, we will be in fact going into step 2 of the reopening phase, which is nice. So that'll allow us to do some of the things that DPOC is planning, such as nice outdoor barbecue, as well as when we have a representative from Lockheed Martin come to discuss EWAS. So yeah, we'll be able to have a nice big gathering for all of that with everyone. So ELINT system application planning at the policy level. So security warning once again, presentation is unclassified. I do go into showing details about how the Royal Canadian Navy would do electronic orders of battle and different orders of battle and ORBATs. However, I did keep it unclassified, so I can still share that with you. Copyright and ownership of everything here belongs to DITA Systems. Once again, the emergency contact information. So we'll go through a quick system review again, as I promised. We'll go into basic EW review, requirements for ELINT parameter lists, or EPLs, and electronic orders of battle, or EOBs. ELINT asset tasking and mission planning, data types such as emitters, intercepts, platforms, and weapons, and briefly go into format distribution of ELINT products and how they can benefit our systems, such as ECM. So again, quickly, the antenna subsystem comprises of the following components: the antenna assembly, which it would be your Omni and your spinning DF antenna, the GPS antenna in the center, and your RF distribution and bit signal generator, or your DTA 959T. MFEL is a 2-channel system. Channel 1 connected to the Omni antenna. Channel 2 connected to your spinning DF antenna. Both channels are fed from the antenna directly to the 959T for your RF signals. The DTA 959T should be placed as close to the bottom of the antenna to minimize your cable losses. And the outputs are fed via long, low-loss RF cables to your system rack, where they enter into the CBL 104 cable box, which provides strain relief from the long cables before distributing them to your 9590 receivers. CBL 104 also has an RF-coupled diagnostic port for each channel, allowing your operators and technicians to view the output signals. Now, your receiver subsystem comprises of the antenna control unit, or ACU, which is what provides your power and control to the spinning DF antenna, your cable distribution unit, or CBL 104, which is your primary entry for all your signals before going to the receivers, the GPS and clock distribution unit, which provides you with your GPS timing. You will have 2 super heterodyne high performance receivers, DTA 9590 alphas, again, 1 for your Omni, 1 for your spinning DF, and you will have a processing and RAID server, or your DTA 5000, which you will be receiving. The one that your primary one will have 96 terabytes, so plenty of storage space for all of your collections. This is one of your primary screens for your operator, which will allow them to select the bands which they want to confirm for searching. All of your bands are broken up into 500 megahertz, going from 0.5 all the way up to 18. Additionally, you will see that you have a weight category for each one of the bands. This allows your operator to emphasize how much time they want to search that specific 500 megahertz bandwidth. You also have your adjustable dwell time here, so you can reduce the amount of time that it's searching, or you can increase the amount of time it's searching. Now, keeping in mind that the longer the dwell time, obviously the longer the time it will take to do a complete search. So it is, I would recommend that basically you only increase your dwell time when you're actually doing your collect and you want to stare at the signal. There's your primary view for your operator. Here you will see your waterfall along with a selectable polar plot, which will give you a geographical bearing of the signals. You will also see your track table below here, which will identify all of your tracks with the number of hits, the time of intercept, frequency, frequency agility, bandwidth, PRF agility, pulse width, the power of the intercepted signal, modulation, if it's known, a bearing, and your track status. Once you've selected a track from the table, you can select track details, which will give you a lot more detail yet with regards to that intercepted signal. It'll give you minimals and maximums and PRI, etc. So. Right. So I believe John has been going through a little bit more detail about how the system works and operates. Are there any questions on the basic system itself at this point, or no?
No, thank you.
Okay, perfect. As we have tried to say, and you know, when trying to develop this system, the idea was to try to make this system as simple as possible for an operator and reduce the amount of time required for the operator to proceed from initiating an overall search to identifying a signal of interest to actually collecting the signal of interest. So the less difficult that whole operation is, obviously, the faster and the more time you're going to be able to get on actual collecting of an ELINT intercept. So electronic warfare, or EW, is one of several disciplines combined to create strategies of information operations, or IO. It is essentially an effort to control the electromagnetic spectrum, or the EM spectrum, in a manner that allows us to gain better battlefield awareness while limiting our adversary's ability to do the same. So your EW divisions, there's 3 divisions of electronic warfare. So you have electronic support measures, or ESM, electronic countermeasures, or ECM, and electronic protective measures, or EPM. So EW involves active or detectable and passive, covert or non-detectable measures. So ESM, of course, being passive, while ECM and EPM may involve both methods. So ESM, actions taken to search for, intercept, and identify electromagnetic emissions and to locate their sources for the purpose of immediate threat recognition. provides a source of information required for immediate decisions involving electronic countermeasures, or ECM, electronic protective measures, or EPM, and other tactical actions. The goal of ESM is to understand who is using the EM spectrum to obtain and disseminate information and to react quickly to its usage. This knowledge enhances target acquisition, cues other ESM systems, such as ELINT systems, and aids in providing platform and force protection. Target acquisition. ESM may have the accuracy to provide target acquisition data sufficient for modern smart weapons or area weapons employment. ESM data can identify and locate potential and actual targets. So especially when you start cross-fixing, if you have 3 ships or multiple ESM systems, be it ship or land-based, and you can triangulate the ESM, you could put in a nice cross-fix, and with the cross-fix, you will get an exact position or location of that signal. So ESM queuing provides the queuing for ECM operations. ESM sensors can be linked to electronic countermeasures and often provide the data required to implement electronic countermeasure activities. Platform and force protection ESM is used in conjunction with other sensors and countermeasures devices to support the protection of platforms and ground facilities. ESM can combine for other activities to provide timely and effective information required to adequately defend friendly assets and resources. Electronic countermeasures are actions taken to prevent or reduce an enemy's effective use of the electromagnetic spectrum using electromagnetic energy. The goal of ECM is to deny the enemy the use of electronic systems that use the electromagnetic spectrum. They are the offensive arm of EW. ECM is broken down into 3 subcategories: electronic jamming, electronic deception, and electronic neutralization. Electronic jamming is the deliberate radiation, re-radiation, or reflection of EM energy with the object of impairing the effectiveness of electronic devices or equipment systems. For us in the RCN, a tremendous amount of jamming would have been used for the purposes of trying to confuse target acquisition or missile homing, that kind of thing, to throw the range gate off of the lock and break the lock of that system. Electronic deception, the deliberate radiation, re-radiation, alteration, absorption, or reflection of EM energy in a manner intended to confuse, distract, or seduce an enemy or their electronic systems. So some of the different ways which we could do this, ram pads, for example, would be a version of deception, because using ram pads on the ship, you can help reduce your radar cross-section and you can make a frigate look no bigger than a fishing boat. Lighting is another example. If you set up lighting similar to that of a fishing boat, then once again, that's again electronic deception. Electronic neutralization is the deliberate use of EM energy to either temporarily or permanently damage enemy devices which are exclusively on the EM spectrum. So this would be basically the intent of jamming their systems to the point of overwhelming it, flooding it, and destroying it. Would take a tremendous amount of energy to do this. Electronic protective measures, or EPM, actions taken to ensure effective friendly use of the electromagnetic spectrum despite the enemy's use of the EM energy. The goal of EPM is to counter an adversary's ECM efforts against friendly forces. EPM techniques can be either active or passive. Emissions control, or EMCON, is the selective control of emitted EM emissions, thereby influencing an adversary's exploitation opportunities. Effective EMCON can be the first line of defense in electronic protective measures. Active EPM, detectable measures such as altering transmitter parameters as necessary to ensure effective friendly use of the EM spectrum. Someone observing the emission can recognize the change in its operating parameters. So frequency hopping would be an example of this. Passive EPM, undetectable measures, such as those in operating procedures and technical features of equipment to ensure effective friendly use of the EM spectrum. Okay, do we have any questions up to this point?
No, thank you.
Okay. So requirements of ELINT, EPL, and EOB products. Before we discuss the fundamentals of radar and antenna, let's review the definitions of various branches of signals intelligence, or SIGINT, communications intelligence, COMINT, and electronic intelligence, or ELINT, electronic support measures, ESM, and how ESM relates to SIGINT. So signals intelligence, or SIGINT, is intelligence derived from electronic signals and systems used by foreign targets, such as communication systems, radars, and weapon systems. SIGINT provides a vital window into foreign adversaries' capabilities, actions, and their intentions. SIGINT is divided into two branches, COMINT and ELINT. Communications intelligence, or COMINT, is intelligence derived from electromagnetic communication systems by other than the intended recipient or users. COMINT is also divided into three branches: interception, exploitation, and direction finding. Interception refers to the ability of unauthorized users or hostile forces to detect that a signal is being transmitted, and is also referred to as detection. Exploitation, also known as demodulation. This communication threat refers to the process of capturing and using the information intended for someone else without the knowledge of the originator or the intended recipients. So exploitation would be you utilizing a comm intercept system on board a ship or alongside, and intercepting a radio transmission between one and another party that is a non-friendly or whatever, right? And finally, direction finding After an operator knows that forces are transmitting in the area, they will try to locate the transmitter's position by using direction finding equipment. A direction finder consists of a radio receiver, a directional antenna, and some other specialized equipment. So ELINT, or electronic intelligence, is intelligence derived from electromagnetic non-communication systems by other than the intended recipients or users. ELINT has two branches: ELINT, or operational ELINT, and tech ELINT, or technical ELINT. So operational ELINT, which concentrates on locating specific ELINT targets and determining their operational patterns of the system. These results are commonly called electronic orders of battle, or EOB. OP-ELINT also provides threat assessment, often referred to as tactical ELINT. OP-ELINT intelligence products support military operational planners and tactical military commanders on the battlefield. Technical ELINT, or tech ELINT, describes the signal structure, emission characteristics, modes of operation, emitter functions, and weapon systems associations of such emitters as radars, beacons, jammers, and navigational signals. A main purpose of tech ELINT is to obtain signal parameters which can define the capabilities and the role that the emitter plays in the larger system, such as a ground radar locating aircraft, and thus lead to the design of the radar detection, countermeasure, and counter weapons equipment. Electronic support measures. Now that you understand the basics of SIGINT, we can discuss electronic support measures and show how SIGINT and ESM relate. ESM is defined as actions taken to search for, intercept, and identify EM emissions and to locate their sources for the purpose of immediate threat recognition. It provides a source of information required for immediate decisions involving electronic countermeasures, electronic protective measures, and other tactical actions. Unlike signals intelligence, ESM is under the direct control of an operational commander. Operational commander could range from a joint or a task force commander receiving ESM data from collection assets to an aircraft captain responding to ESM data processed by the aircraft's radar warning receiver, or RWR. ESM applies to a wide range of activities, including threat detection, location, warnings, emitter avoidance, and in some cases, target acquisition and homing for the purposes of destruction and suppression of radiating systems. So the SIGINT ESM relationship, understanding the relationship between SIGINT and ESM is important for several reasons. Although the signals that are dealt with are the same, the way they are handled is very different. ESM data is processed only to the extent required for immediate identification, determining the intentions of, or locating the source of enemy EM radiation. Further technical analysis of the data received can result in it becoming SIGINT. Conversely, ESM may draw on SIGINT data in order to be effective. So this is basically where the better your ELINT collections, the more detail within your ELINT collection, the better your ESM libraries are, and the faster you can identify emitters out in your surrounding area, which also then in turn will speed up your picture compilation and threat analysis. SIGINT information is used to develop friendly electronic equipment and weapon systems, and to develop tactics and doctrine to counter the enemy's weapon systems. It provides the data necessary to detail the all-important enemy electronic order of battle, or EOB. SIGINT also provides the data necessary to target strategic weapons. ESM is used for immediate mission planning and particularly for threat avoidance. For example, ESM can provide an aircrew with the type and location of the defensive systems engaging them, and may even provide them the data necessary for automatic countermeasures, systems to initiate countermeasures such as chaff or flares. ESM may also provide targeting for such things as anti-radiation missiles or ARM missiles and artillery, and provide maritime patrol aircraft or MPAs with location information about an emitting submarine. In summary, SIGINT is a strategic activity that exploits the signals environment in order to assess the enemy's capabilities. ESM is a division of EW and thus provides a source of information required to conduct electronic countermeasures, electronic protect measures, threat detection, threat warning, avoidance, and target acquisition homing. One of the primary roles of ESM is to provide the military commander and or the operator a capability that can be integrated with their operational forces. So how is ELINT collected? A basic ELINT sensor is a receiver that works in the frequency bands of interest. Once the signal is received, other ELINT equipment can analyze, record, and locate it. ELINT equipment can be either manually or computer controlled. In manual systems, receivers are individually tuned, and analysis is usually accomplished using a pulse analyzer. Operators turn on recording devices, locate signals using direction finding or DF equipment. Computer-controlled systems intercept, sort, identify, locate, and process large quantities of signal data at a much faster rate than those possible by manual systems. Multiple receivers can be rapidly tuned through thousands of megahertz. Computer-controlled systems can be loaded with data files containing location information and radar parametric data. These files can be compared to each intercept to determine if the intercept is a known radar and mode, and if it is emanating from a known site. Through this process, it can rapidly identify and categorize each intercept. This information can be used to provide real-time warning to friendly forces and to prioritize use of manual systems for in-depth analysis. The manual systems can also validate the accuracy of the signal information gathered by the computers. So as great as computer systems are and whatever else, when it comes to ELINT, as far as I'm concerned, you never want to take the operator out of the loop. Far too often, in my experience, I have seen automated systems incorrectly identify a signal of interest, and at times incorrectly assign a signal of interest to a vessel on the radar system when there could be another vessel hiding directly behind it, shadowing, which then creates problems for command when you start to do your tactical planning against a shipping container vice the warship that is hiding behind it. All of the collected data is stored in various databases and to be used in programs to program various types of electronic warfare equipment. So a few examples of some databases are your ELINT parameter lists, the Maritime Emitter Database, or MEDB, the NATO Emitter Database, or NEDB, and of course, those are just a few samples. There are several different emitter databases that exist. Most countries will generally have their own, and then if they are coalitions with any other countries, they will normally have joint. So an order of battle, OOB, or sometimes known as an ORBAT, is a general breakdown of a military force which can list such things as the command structure, strength, the disposition or the numbers of all air, land, and sea assets. It could discuss strategic points of interest such as ammunition depots or fueling stations, bridges, etc. So here is a basic look at a command structure for an ORBAT. So it starts out with the Governor General down to the Minister of National Defense, Chief of Defense Staff, then breaks into all of your elements, so Air Force, Army, Naval, your different Air Force divisions, if there's a reserve division, for example, your Army, and if there's Army reserves, and your naval forces, and if there is a naval reserve. So this just basically gives your senior command positions and tactical planners an overall breakdown of the hierarchy of a foreign military. So an example of a geographical order of battle. So what we will refer to as country X has a population of 815,000 people. Capital city is known as Omega. Active military personnel is 2,630. Reserve personnel are 900. Here you could also list the name of, say, the President, the Minister of National Defense, Chief of Defense Staff, and the names of the commanders of your different elements. And then if we know positional data as well, we can put in, so we know that our capital city of Omega is located here. The National Defense Headquarters is located right next to it. And we know that they have an early warning radar site located in the central region of the island, the international airport and the Air Force base, the location of the Army Reserve Unit, and the location of the naval base. So for a written order of battle, this is the kind of thing that my trade would do before any type of a deployment, whether it's a task group exercise, something such as RIMPAC, or if it was for an actual deployment. And if it was for an actual deployment, we would break these down into actual areas and in all the countries that we knew that we would possibly intercept along our transit. So we would go into everything such as early warning radar sites, recording all types of information such as the radar itself, what the role of the radar was, so long range EW, the band, and what the range was. By doing all of this information, what we could do then is actually add all of this onto a map or a geographical OOB, which would then allow us to put range rings as well. I'll show you a sample of that in a little bit. So we would break down all the known assets for the Air Force, the Navy, possibly the Army. Typically, we would focus more on Air Force and Navy because those are the ones that we're going to see. So we'll break right into what they have, what the combat range might be, the speed, types of radar, known weapon systems attached to those. Do the same thing for the Navy. And then this information would generally sit or be dispersed inside the ship to various people within the operations room, command, sometimes onto the bridge, etc. Just out of curiosity, is this something? Does this look somewhat similar to something the RTN would prepare, or no?
Yes, for us, we also list the critical infrastructure for the area that we invest, we consider. For example, the dam, the electrics, something like that, and also the like the area for the cyber.
Yes.
Cyber
is getting huge.
The network, we put all of this on the OOB.
Very interesting.
Yes, that is. I just want to share.
Yeah, no, that's great. I like learning. The more I can learn about how you do things and operate within the RTN, whatever else, then obviously the more that we can try to help you with building your EWAS and everything else, right? So. So for an electronic order of battle or an EOB, usually an EOB will be secret. So in order to keep this unclassified, what I've done is obviously I've just taken out all the actual parameters. But this is generally how one of our EOBs would be laid out. So again, usually classified as secret, lists all electronic radiating equipment on a military force, be it air, land, or sea. An EOB can also include known geographical locations, functions, parameters, known associations, and capabilities, such as range or mobility. EOBs are often used by electronic sensor operators and or analysts for aiding in the identification of emitters and associating to contacts. This process is also a key factor in picture compilation and threat deduction in an operational area. So again, this is where this is something that my trade used to do, where this would be a lot more detail, and this is where, again, the better your ELINT collections are, the more detailed your EOBs are going to be. So again, what you will see is we would go into all the different elements that were known, be it land, air, sea. We would break down everything from the platform to the role. We would put in the emitter types and the functions, the frequencies, and obviously where you have an emitter that is going to have multiple modes, then you're going to include more lines on here, unless you want to just keep it as basic as possible, where you would say, even though the radar has two different modes and the two modes operate in different frequency bands, then maybe you would just include all of that into here. Usually for my section, when we went out, I had them put in additional lines with the multiple bands. I wanted it broken down specifically so that it was more detailed for command. We would include all the scan rates, scan types, and then any types of comments that might be of particular interest to command, such as if the vessel is unarmed, if certain systems are for specific associated weapons, such as missiles or the gun, if it is capable of carrying a helicopter and whatnot. And then down below here, we would have, so for example, for non-Navy associated aircraft, we would have the CH-124 Bravo. So its primary role is as ASW, or submarine warfare, basically what we always used to joke and say awfully slow warfare, because submarine warfare is generally long drawn out. And then again, information for command and whatnot. So what emitters are associated to them, the functions, the parameters, scan types, etc., and possible associated weapon systems. So all of this information for how we did our picture compilation as well is we would further break down, so we would understand what the range and the speed of the weapon systems was, so that when we identified, for example, let's say our ESM operator picks up an AN/APS 506 radar and we get a bearing, maybe we'll try to do a triangulation of the bearing so that we get an exact position, unless the ESM happens to go down a perfect straight bearing line and contacts a actual vessel that we can identify as an unknown aircraft. We will then associate the APS 506 to that aircraft, which will then allow us to either make it an assumed friend, a hostile, a suspect, etc., for our threat compilation, picture compilation. From there, we could further on ask one of the operators to, let's say we knew that it had an associated weapon system, and we knew that that weapon system had a range of, say, 25 nautical miles. We could ask them to put a range ring around that particular contact with a range ring of 25 nautical miles. And now command can see visually on their screen whether or not they're coming within range, and, you know, if we need to take more advanced methods and procedures and actions. So again, would this be something similar that that the RTN would generally do for an operation?
Yes, it looks similar. It look quite similar.
Very good. Okay, so do we have any questions up to this point?
For now, nothing. Thank you.
Nothing for now. Okay, so what we can do is we'll take a quick 15-minute break right now. We'll come back at about 1400 or 2 o'clock, and this will give me time to go and contact David and bring David in here. And I know he has a list of things that he'd like to go over with you as well, and we can go through some of the different operational aspects of a EWAS or a joint operational center.
So good.
Perfect. So I will see you all in about 15 minutes. All right. So as discussed, went and spoke with retired Lieutenant Commander David Coffey. He's going to come in and speak with us in just a few minutes. I just have a couple of other slides to go through before he comes in. And we are going to discuss the operational and command side whatnot of Joint Operational Centers, or EWOS. So building up to that, we'll carry on here with the lesson. So prompt analysis of EW data and timely association to radar contacts provides command with an accurate overall picture in order to plan navigational or flight routes, determine threat intentions, and develop battle plans. So the diagram below is used for plotted positions of identified early warning sites with range rings of the associated identified emitters. From here, a navigating officer can safely plan a ship's transit, assuring command of minimal to no detection from surrounding countries. So here's an example of, again, what my group or my team on the ship would have done, where we would go into an area and identify all of the known sources of EW emissions. And then we would identify the radars, if possible, identify the radar sites, and then look for the ranges. We would put in our range rings from the known sites, some of which, as you can see, they have overlapping and whatever else, which would give them even that much more precise data and bearing information. And from doing this, basically the navigational officer can safely plan a route where we can go right through and should relatively be undetected from going through. So picture compilation is intended to primarily establish the recognition and identification of an entity. Threat evaluation establishes the current intent, opportunity, and lethality of non-friendly entities within the volume of interest based upon numerous sources, including prior information or your intelligence, the tactical picture, and operational constraints. So collated information from all of these sources is interpreted as part of the overall analysis of threat information to discern patterns which may provide clues to hostile intent, opportunity, and or lethality. So for example, in this screen here, you will see on your radar image, you have 3 contacts suddenly popping up to the northwest. From a director's point of view here, typically I would be calling for what in the Royal Canadian Navy was known as a resolve procedure, in which case you would go out with the direction internally, all positions switch, resolve 3 air unknown, bearing 350. Here we get all types of information, such as possible known speed, point of origin, whether they're traveling within air lanes, if this is air contacts, the fact that they are traveling in formation, all of that kind of information. From there, it would go over to the ESM side, and if we have any known ESM on these contacts, then we would say Serrano, a bearing of 350, carried on the Mirage, threat would be Exocet, right? So here's basically the start of our picture compilation, where we can try to identify the contacts and try to resolve what their possible intent is. And from there, we would go out to doing things such as reading warnings, And if that doesn't work and whatnot, then obviously you would carry on and proceed to assigning weapons and establishing your intent to defend yourself, right? So ELINT systems are used to monitor maritime traffic in your area of responsibility, AOR, and for your extended area of interest, or your AOI. By fingerprinting signals of interest, or SOIs, on a vessel of interest, VOI, you can track their transit patterns and their frequency. These fingerprints can then be added to your ESM libraries to share with warships and aircraft for identification purposes. So again, not 100% sure what your actual AOR or AOI would look like, but this is just a rough sample based on my time at the MARPAC HQ and the Joint Operational Center there. So we would generally tend to monitor water lines within the borders as our area of responsibility, specifically out to the 12 nautical mile range, obviously. However, obviously for you, you're gonna want to know what is coming in here based on the fact that your border lines are there, right? Also, your area of interest, which extends further out. It's always nice to know what's going on in the outer regions. So I know specifically this region here, very, very high in piracy. When I traveled through there on board HMCS Winnipeg, we had deceptive lighting on and whatnot when we were transiting through there, transiting through at nighttime, and suddenly picked up 4, I believe it was, fast-moving small contacts on the sea approaching us. Due to the deceptive lighting that we had on board, they continued their approach until they got close enough where command basically went out and identified as Canadian warship Winnipeg. You are approaching our vicinity, and if continue to do so, we will be forced to defend ourselves. And at that point was when he put the spotlights on all of the weapon systems, the primary weapon systems, the Harpoon missiles, the 57mm cannon, etc. And oddly, all 4 contacts very quickly turned and hauled back towards Malaysia. Okay, so a regional or joint operations center, again, we have discussed this before, but as I'm going to bring David in here with us in a moment, I thought it would be a good idea to just kind of go through some of this again quickly for you. So an RJOC is typically a joint in terms of the multiple organizations or combining interests and responsibilities. This can include various departments of defense, such as your Navy and your Air Force, sometimes your Coast Guard. Organizations such as Department of Fisheries or Wildlife, Department of Immigration, law enforcement, usually responsible for monitoring activities such as counterintelligence for vessels of interest, illegal fishing operations, migrant smuggling, etc., drug running and drug farming. So I believe we just received the draft from EA with regards to what they want to do for setting to work. Did any of you receive that or no?
Not yet.
Not yet?
Yes.
Okay. So basically, it seems that we're going to this region here. There's one that they want to do a shore testing, and then another one that they want to do on board one of the ships, setting the system up on the bridge area, and then also aft right around the top of the hangar, and doing some tests, I believe, with the system on the jetty. So we're going to be going through that system, through their plan, their proposal, and getting back to them about that, and hopefully we can have everything ironed out for that before you guys go home.
Actually, the location for setting to work we already finalized, but we're still waiting for how to install or how to setting the system for the test.
Okay. So an RJOC typically monitors specific areas known as area responsibility or the area of interest, your AOR, and your AOI. These are normally linked to land borders, extend out to open sea. Factors which will influence those regions are generally shipping lanes, fishing areas, and known areas of illegal operations such as piracy or areas of drug running, etc. Some of your different types of assets for an RJOC would be military patrol aircraft for imaging, position confirmation, and ESM. Maritime patrol craft for interception, imaging, ESM, and sometimes ELINT collection as well. Your small patrol craft are usually good for doing littoral ELINT because quite often they're out there patrolling the region and a little faster moving than say a destroyer or a frigate, so they can get a little closer to vessels of interest to record the signal of interest for you. Shore facilities for command and control, ELINT analysis, areas for developing your EPLs or ELINT parameter lists, your EOBs, your databases, etc. And of course, now getting into more modern cyber and whatnot, getting very active as well. You're starting to see more systems on board UAVs. We have, in fact, actually developed a ELINT collection capability on board a UAV that we're working on a project right now, a side project. Becoming very popular. Okay, so I'm going to try to wave David in here, and we can carry on in just 1 second. There we go. All right, so gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. David Coffey. David worked as an officer at the MARPAC headquarters in Esquimalt, BC, while I was there. So he has a lot of experience working in a joint operational center from a command perspective. And I've asked him to come in here and share some of his experiences with you.
I'm David Coffey, retired commander from the Royal Canadian Navy. I was a naval warfare officer specializing in information warfare, C4ISR, in both joint and maritime environments. And I served in Canadian minesweepers, destroyers, and frigates. And I had 2 exchange postings with the United States Navy in 3rd Fleet and with the UK Navy in the Canadian High Commission in London. I was responsible for surveillance of the west coast of Canada and the Arctic, and the intelligence sharing of that data that was collected with the Five Eyes community, principally the UK, US, and Australia. And a good portion of my surveillance work was in the planning and monitoring of the data collection that was underway for national interest. And by this, I mean the national interest of Canada in understanding what's going around in and around our exclusive economic zone, and as well our approaches to the country and our ports. As well, I was responsible for the quality of the intelligence and which intelligence we shared with our allies. So the important part I want to relay here is that two-way intelligence sharing is a very good way of establishing country-to-country trust and confidence, but also building a relationship between the intelligence organizations of those countries. The better and the more detailed and quality of intelligence information that is passed, the better and bigger trust that you can develop with other nations and allies. So I want to cover briefly some of the principles I used in the surveillance plan I was responsible for. So first, I have to develop what an understanding of normal is, so that the majority of our focused surveillance attention and our surveillance assets and collection of data was on targets that were abnormal, that were not following normal traffic patterns or normal behavior. The next thing was responsible to be seen conducting surveillance. So if we were sending out a maritime patrol aircraft to do EW collect on a target, more times than not, we would want that aircraft to be seen by the target so that they know they're being surveyed or information collected on them. But there are some exceptions that I'll cover a little bit later. Lastly, we wanted to make sure that we collected validated data. So that's not just a signature file, but with videos or with photography, with electro-optical or IR, and with an annotated narrative by a collection team to make sure that the report is very thorough and can be relied upon and people have confidence in the information collected. So there are many data sets and assets used in surveillance. And I'm going to go at a very high level of how we did it in Canada. So the foundation is primarily open source data. And this open source data is voluntary reporting. So this is reporting by AIS, it's reporting by customs, it's reporting by business processes, by port authorities, by harbor pilots on traffic moving into and out of an area. We're also using on this baseline data, AIS data that's collected from space. So we have the space collection, we have terrestrial AIS collection, and we also have AIS collected on all the government's ships. So these could be research and development ships, they could be Canadian Coast Guard ships, or they could be military ships. But that AIS data that's being collected on the ships is being sent by the command and control system back to the headquarters, to the surveillance center, and that AIS data is then fused with the space AIS data and other assets to develop a fuller understanding of what's going on in the area. In Canada, we have a joint maritime surveillance operations center that enables not only this data fusion in the military, but we also have a customs fusion part. We have an RCMP or National Police Service fusion part, and we have the border control fusion part. So all those four people or four organizations work independently in the same operations center, but when they're authorized by a minister, because of the civil law in Canada, they can then begin to share the information directly from their database into other databases. So the largest data fusion center is with the military. The next one is with Customs and Immigration, and then the police database. That baseline data that we have of AIS, customs report, police reports, border reports, port entry and pilot reports, has in Canada also radar sat data. So that's space-based synthetic aperture radar that's looking at targets and can go typically around 15 meters and greater. And it also does weight detection. So this is important because I'll get to a little bit later the difference between a cooperative target that wants to be seen and can be seen and an uncooperative target that does not want to be seen or wants to falsely represent itself. Now, a sidebar, that compliant target is emitting on SATCOM, it's emitting on its navigation radars or other radars, and it's transmitting an AIS stream that follows the International Maritime Organization instructions. That non-compliant target is one that may not be using their radar, and often we find that suspicious vessels do not use their navigation radar as other vessels do. They may also be transmitting false AIS data with a false AIS number, vessel number, or by misrepresenting their course and speed. These targets, those non-compliant ones, or those ones that are abnormal, are typically the targets of manned surveillance missions and collection missions. Now, collection missions, as I mentioned, are typically overt in nature, meaning that the value in the collection is increased when we can see with our own eyes the target. So we can see that it is a specific, say, Chinese frigate, or it's a German fishing ship, or it's a research and development vessel, but seeing it with our own eyes, recording that on camera, recording that on video, and then annotating, saying we saw this hull number and we saw it doing these kind of things, made that collection very, very important. At first, I was always worried about surveying these ships and being seen. So the instructions I started off early in my surveillance career was to see the target vessel, but not be seen. But we found over 10 years of doing this job that being seen caused a reaction from that targeted vessel where sometimes, not always, but sometimes they started being compliant. So they fixed their AIS to report properly, or they turned on their navigation radar. Now, counter-narcotic surveillance typically is a see the target, but don't be seen yourself. And I'm not going to deal specifically with the counter-narcotics, but I'll deal with non-compliance and surveillance without being seen very shortly. There is, from time to time, a requirement to conduct covert surveillance. And this takes a lot of additional planning and effort because you want to position the surveillance aircraft or surveillance vessel such that it can see electronically or sense with other sensors that target vessel and have high confidence that they're only seeing that vessel. So sometimes you have to go all the way around to the other side and position yourself so you're looking in a certain direction because you know that that has the least amount of background vessels there. In the covert missions, you need to exploit electro-optical sensors that can give positive identification outside counter visual range. And you want to make sure that you're not having background scatter of electronic noise between you and your target or behind your target. To be clear, the best surveillance missions for collection are when you have a known target and you have an idea about what you should be able to collect and detect. The collected data from a mission is very valuable to you and to your country, and it's likely valuable to your allies and friends as well. This is part of the reason that EW data is highly classified. It's highly protected, and it's not easily or freely shared with anybody else. The value is that you have validated data. There's visual proof with imagery collected, and there's annotated observer written reports. This is a valuable EW collection. There's very little doubt that this is what you collected. That high confidence allows that detection and that collection to go high into EW databases and to form the essential parts of the libraries that are going to be collected and configured for various sensors. Now, electronic collection of a very interesting signal or potentially adversary signal is interesting, but it's very hard to use it in a database because it's missing the context, it's missing confidence in the identification of that signal to a platform or to an emitter. It does have some value though, because it provides context. So if you detect a fire control radar in international waters near a exercise area of another nation, then the context is this is likely perhaps a fire control radar, and that's helpful. But it's not going to go into the library, and it's unlikely to be used in the database as a foundation observation. So it's valuable, but not nearly as valuable as one that's fully annotated. Now, military target surveillance is complicated. There's typically, in this case, you have to work on developing the scenario you're going to use to capture the information. So it's not necessarily simple as sail to an area and observe a foreign country's warship and how its navigation radars are working. Sometimes it's to determine what tactics or what techniques or procedures they're using with their various sensors. And so it can be very complicated, where Thailand is going to consider how they're going to stimulate that foreign vessel and record how that foreign vessel responds to that by collecting well-timed and well-documented EW collection. So if you're looking at a foreign ship or foreign warship and it has a helicopter, one of the things that you may do is schedule a scenario where an aircraft overflies that vessel. So that vessel may have various responses to that overflight because they're operating a helicopter. And if you are prepared to record all the reactions by that vessel, you're getting a very good EW record and the annotation of this is what was seen, this is what was given as a provocation or a stimulation, and this was the change in signals that we saw. So those are very beneficial, and they help develop your own nation's tactics, techniques, and procedures, but also can be shared with your allies and friends, and they can then build on that information that you've captured. So it's very, very valuable. Now, to conclude, there are a few things that helped me on the West Coast dealing with surveillance over a decade. First is know the traffic routes and exploit the vast amount of freely accessible long-term AIS voyage information. So if you look at the chart and you see the typical passage voyage routes, shallow draft vessels, fishing vessels, cargo vessels, pilot vessels, etc., you have a good pattern of life of what's on the ocean. So then you can start paying attention to vessels that are outside those patterns or vessels that aren't in a straight transit. You have to create processes to correlate. That means to data fuse business information, customs information, and police maritime information with all those other tracks that you have, such that you have a very full view of those contexts. So typically it's AIS based, then positional based, and it has all the contextual of this is such and such a company vessel, and it goes 10 times a year from this port to this port, and everything is normal, or we've never seen this vessel before, we need to pay attention. You need to undertake a threat risk assessment to Thailand itself on what are the threats to the country and what are the priority. So if it's illegal shipment of arms, and that's a priority, or it's counter drugs, or it's foreign incursions, or it's foreign fishermen, you need to prioritize that such that the manned surveillance platforms that you do have can be put in a priority effort. So if you don't have a priority list, you'll spend a lot of time, like Canada did early on, chasing illegal fishermen and avoiding or missing illegal immigration from China in this case. You have to ensure that the collection platforms, so those that are going to collect EW information, have an EW team or a surveillance intelligence team that has been trained and they know what to collect. So it's not good just to have one or two electronics sensor operators recording it. You need a photographer or videographer or ability to capture the ship's electro-optical instruments and record all of that with a narrative from a senior operator that can understand what's going on and make sense in written word what they've observed and what records have been kept. And then the last one I wanted to pay attention in the important parts is to protect your collections. So by protect, I mean it's with security, it's with classification, and it's with trust and a need to know. They are valuable to you, they're valuable to your nation, they're valuable to your allies, and they're valuable to your adversaries because they want to know what you've collected and why you've collected. So the last part when I talk about EW collections is there's always going to be intercepts and collects that you do that don't match what you've done before, that don't match what you expect. This is typical. You don't throw it away. You don't doubt your collection. You make your observation, and then you understand that equipment changes happen, equipment malfunctions happen, and it gives different signatures. And you have to rely on a system where you have junior analysts collecting, you have senior analysts that are looking at the collective of observations, and you have more senior analysts at the top or managers that are making decisions on, is this abnormal collection I've made part of this a mistake or just an aberration that we're just going to park? So I'm going to stop there. I hope I've given you some insight of how the organization is done to survey, how you plan your surveillance missions, and also how valuable the information that you collect is. And I'm ready for any questions.
Okay, I have just some questions. The one thing that let me introduce myself. I'm Commander Termpong Saitong, EW Detection Department Officer. You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. One question is that because we now set up the ELINT in Thailand just the last year, we just the initial state, like the climbing state, we now to set up the database and plug it in and put it in the EWAT. We try to correct the data from our site first for the ship, the aircraft, for the Navy, Thai Navy first to prevent some at least when we go to the exercise, we know which one is outside, which one is the other. My question is how we can do this one? How do we can collect the data from outside, or we just believe in the specifications or the chain books, or we have to do the exact detection from the equipment at the ship or the airplane.
Okay, if I understand your question, it's basically how much trust do you have in that your database is correct? And
yes.
whether you have to adjust your database from time to time or constantly. And this answer is probably not going to make you happy, but it's a constant effort of a group of people at different levels of seniority and experience, because a really enthusiastic collector will say, I've got a great EW collection, and in my heart, I know that this is what I saw. And if that gets into the database without many years of experience looking at it and weighing it on the evidence and the annotations that were made with it, it's going to screw up the database for everybody else. And so the real-time or near real-time data that's coming in and adding information and depth to the database is good, but the database shouldn't do what we would call a knee-jerk reaction. So it shouldn't drastically change until it's had some sober thought and some senior management looking at it. And that senior management is normally 12 to 15 years of EW experience.
Okay, thank you. Another thing is that the challenging, except the collection of the data, is the analysis part. There are a huge of the data package that might workload for the operator back at the back of this. So could you, based on your experience, do you have some recommendation for do this job analysis?
So I sort of said this a couple of times, but the best collections are when the person or the unit that made the collection had a visual encounter as well. So the best collections are when the combat officer or the commanding officer says, I encountered frigate number 22 in this position, and this is the information we collected. And we saw that they were training their fire control radar to a plastic target in the ocean. That is what's valuable collection. If it's just, we think we saw a fire control radar, that isn't as effective.
Okay. Last questions, because we use several sensors to collect the data, so that make the so difference the EPL. So this is the big challenging as well, because the column doesn't match for each other from the different sensor we collect the data.
Yes, so my experience on the West Coast is there was a lot of national assets that we had available, which is surveillance from space. And while those provided the greatest amount of coverage and the greatest number of intercepts, they also had the greatest variation in the signal collected, as the position of the sensor and the Doppler speed between whatever they're sensing and the speed over the ground of the satellite provided a lot of different information, where ground-based or ship-based or maritime patrol aircraft-based EW collection was extremely reliable, because you could position things such that there was a minimal amount of Doppler change and that the signal was consistently what was recorded. Did that help?
Okay, thank you so much. That's all for me.
Okay.
Is there anyone have another questions, please? ปูนมีอะไรถามไหมปูน
ไม่มีครับพี่
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I appreciate your sacrifice the time to sharing the experience. So it help us for do our job in the future. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. And if you have any questions that come up in the next week or so, just relay them to Byron and he'll ask me and I'll give you a response.
Okay, thank you very much.
Goodbye. Thank you so much, David. All right.
All right, gentlemen. We could just take a quick 10. Oh, there we go. That's better. We could just take a quick 10-minute break. I could just realign some of the lesson here, and we can get back to concluding today's lesson. I hope that David's insight gave you a little bit of information with regards to setting up your future EWOS and joint operational centers. As I said, David has substantial experience in this area, working at a command level, and then when we worked there together, I worked with him and for him, working at the operational level and controlling the floor. So, as he said, if you have any questions, future questions whatsoever, please feel free to reach out to me. My email address is included in all of the different lessons. So if you have questions for myself or for David or whatever, please reach out, and we will do our best to get you answers to help you out immediately. So on that, we'll take a quick break, and we'll come back just before 3, and we'll wrap up with the remaining lesson for the day.
Okay.
So emitter data types, emitters, intercepts, platforms, and weapons. ELINT data can be transmitted and received from many sources, be it air, land, sea, or space. From these sources, there are multiple branches of additional ELINT sources as per below. So we have early warning, we have anti-surface warfare, we have anti-air warfare, and then we have the awfully slow warfare or submarine warfare. So in order to effectively identify recorded emissions, your electronic sensor operator, or ESOP, as we refer to them here in Canada, need to have a thorough understanding of electromagnetic terminology and the use of the EM spectrum. Here are a few examples of various types of radars with the typical parameters and an explanation. So our first one is an acquisition radar, typically in the 2 to 8 gig area for frequency. PRF can be anywhere from 800 to 3500 hertz with a pulse width of 1 to 4 microseconds. The power medium is 0.25 to 1. The beam shape can vary from wide to narrow. Scan types are normally circular with a scan time of normally 1 to 5 seconds and a range of anywhere from 10 to 140 nautical miles. So why they are chosen is for a medium range, has a shorter, unambiguous range, good range resolution, and medium range detection. For a long range radar, typically looking at 0.1 to 4 gigahertz, and that's chosen for a long range. PRF is going to be low in the 2 to 800 hertz, and that again for your maximum unambiguous range. You're going to have a longer pulse width and a higher power, obviously. Again, all required in order to obtain your long distance, your long range. And you're typically going to see in an instance like this for a long range early warning radar, the dish itself will be ginormous. Your scan type can vary anywhere from vertical to horizontal to circular, all depending on what the primary function of said long range radar is. If this is specifically a height finding radar, then it's going to be a long parabolic dish that will be going in an up and down kind of feature. If this is a long range, say early warning aircraft or surface radar, then more likely it's going to have a circular scan. So the range for these typically 100 to 400 plus nautical miles. Fire control radar, again, depending on antenna size and whatnot, can have a very wide frequency range. Generally anywhere from 2.6 up to 18 gigahertz. Your PRF, continuous return of energy, you're going to look at about 1,000 to 5,000 hertz with a very short pulse width. It's going to have a concentrated power for a continuous wave style of waveform. The beam shape, obviously, then will be about a pencil beam. Quite often, your scan type is going to be conical raster, or a bidirectional. and it's concerned only with the target area. Your scan time will be very fast, and your range generally shorter, specifically with the much higher frequency. For target tracking radar, you're going to be looking at anywhere from 3 to 20 gigahertz. PRF is going to be usually high from 900 up to 4,000 hertz for a fast updating rate. Again, with the higher the frequency, obviously you're shorter the range. Your pulse width is generally going to be short. Your power will be lower, specifically because it's not focusing on a large area or a long range. You're looking at a pencil beam again, usually raster or a bidirectional. Scan time usually less than 1 second, and the range again is going to be 5 to maybe 50 nautical miles. For TI, or target illuminating radar, it'd be anywhere from 0.75 up to 25 gigahertz, all variant on the antenna size. Your PRF is going to be a constant, so a continuous wave. Pulse width, there will be none. The power, however, will be phenomenally high for a target illuminating, and it's a concentrated power with a continuous updating rate in order to light up the target for the weapon system. Your beam shape, once again, will be a pencil with a steady scan, no scan time, and a range again of short, anywhere roughly 50 nautical miles or less, based on the associated weapon. Air intercept, generally going to look at 9 to 14 gigs, again, antenna size and type variant. Your PRF can be anywhere from 6 to 34,000 hertz. Your pulse width will be short. Power is going to be generally low. Your beam shape will vary anywhere from a pencil to a fan. The scan type can be anywhere from raster to sector or bidirectional. Scan time can vary with the scan type, and your range can be anywhere from 100 nautical miles or less. Do we have any questions about those? Obviously, the more radars change and technology changes, all of those baseline parameters and identifiers will change and vary, right? Okay, so analysis of the raw data gives you a radar fingerprint. And the components of the fingerprint generally include your transmitted power, derived from the received power and the distance between the radar transmitter and the ELINT receiver. Your carrier frequency, derived from the signal spectrum. Your modulation, derived from the signal spectrum and envelope. The antenna pattern, derived from the time variation and mobile ELINT receiver. Your antenna scan, derived from time variation. And the transmitter location, derived from the angle of arrival, the RF, or time using various emitter location techniques. So as David was saying and reiterating, and as I said before, the more information and detail that you can collect with a fingerprint, the better and more detailed your libraries will be, your EOBs will be, the better your ECM features will be. And here's exactly where on board the warship, our above water warfare director was responsible for the ESM and the intelligence gathering team. And with the intelligence gathering team, we would have a photographer and or a videographer. We would have someone for logging and taking notes. And the information would include, for example, the geographical location of the collect, the exact known Latin long of our ship, if possible, the Latin long of the ship or the signal of intercept, time of day, anything and everything that could possibly have some sort of impact on your collect. Meteorological. So what was the weather like? It was hot and humid. It was raining. Again, because rain can cause noise and whatnot. Very, very, very important information for your analysts to understand. Whether you're in a littoral, close to land location, or if you're out in the open ocean. If you're out in the open ocean, what was the wave status? Was there a lot of wave movement? Was it nice and calm? Were there any other vessels in the surrounding area? For example, could there have been another shipping boat or a fishing fleet off in the distance behind the signal of interest that you could potentially be recording intercepted signals from a contact in the far distance, right? Again, from a command standpoint, also be aware that the more you're able to adjust your own ship's heading and speed, possibly reduce the amount of EM energy that you are currently radiating, the less background noise, again, that you can possibly include into the fingerprint and the ELINT collection. So here was an example that was given to us. The benefit basically of a good fingerprint when it comes to ECM, such as chaff and IR. So fingerprinted signals play a vital role in the reprogramming of electronic support measures and threat libraries, improving emitter databases, developing electronic attack, such as jamming, electronic protect, such as chaff and IR, or your MCON policies. Below here is a good example and a poor example of IR coverage against an incoming missile displayed in the diagram. So I could just get my mouse here. Here we go. So to the left here, what you are seeing is a good representation. So this is because of good ELINT fingerprinting that you're able to mimic the size and the IR signature of the ship itself. And the only way you can really tell which is you can see a bit of the tail here from the motion of the ship. But other than that, your signature blocks are very, very similar. So this, when fired, will make it very difficult for an incoming missile to come in and know which target to lock onto. This right here is a very good example of what poor collection can do as far as your electronic protective measures. This here is your chaff and IR cloud, which, as you can tell, looks absolutely nothing like the actual ship. So this is not going to confuse a missile homer by any means whatsoever. And that, gentlemen, concludes the lesson for today. Do we have any questions?
All questions already asked during the class. On for now, nothing. Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
Hey, Byron,
Yes,
can I ask some question about the database?
absolutely.
The Canadian Navy have some have to cooperation about share information, share database with the Air Force, with the Canadian Air Force.
Yes.
Okay, and the other defense force as well.
Yes, indeed. We have Canada, due to Canada being part of NATO, due to Canada being part of what is known as the Five Eyes community. So you have Canada, the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand, which make up the Five Eyes countries. So we have an abundance of different databases, which we share internally with all of our elements. So the Navy, the Army, the Air Force, and even our Coast Guard. And we have databases which we share information at various security levels with the Five Eyes countries and with NATO, right? So we have access to a number of different emitter databases within Canada. And obviously with different security security ratings and whatnot, you know, a lot more information is shared between the three Canadian elements than what is shared between the Five Eyes elements, and then still far more than what is shared with the NATO elements. But generally, we try to share within the Canadian Armed Forces, we try to share everything with one another. And a lot of that is the primary focus of the Canadian Forces Electronic Warfare Center, or CFUC, which is here in Ottawa. That was my final posting before I retired from the military. I was the SIGINT production chief there. So basically my responsibility was kind of coordinating data sharing between the Canadian Army, the Canadian Navy, the Canadian Air Force, as well as with Department of Fisheries for certain things, with local law enforcement, specifically the government law enforcement, so the RCMP. In Canada, the RCMP itself even has maritime vessels which go out and do patrol. So when possible, we would try to share some information with them so that if we knew of signals of intercept, for example, if we knew of a known fishing boat that might have been used as a drug runner, then we would share all of that information with them. Everything from maybe a known AIS, its known home port of origin. If we had fingerprinted their navigational radar or multiple radars, all of this information would be shared with them as well.
Okay, I got it. Thanks.
You bet. And this is where, when you're setting up your joint EWAS with the Air Force, I mean, the Air Force and the Navy have maritime patrol aircraft, which have to go out and fly certain patrol routes. And this is where their collecting of ESM and sharing it with you from the naval side can benefit, because you know, the aircraft is going to be out and flying around. It's going to pick up ESM on things. Your ships will be out there also picking up ESM on things. You can be tasking the aircraft, you know, hey, with that signal of interest has come up several times. The next time you're flying in that region, can you try to collect some imaging? And you know, tasking one another, you know, can we collect some photographs of the hull, the superstructure, the mast, maybe video of the radar, especially if it's an open radar when it's spinning. You know, all of this detail just helps you to build that much more thorough of a database, and then the return when you look at your ESM libraries is just phenomenal. It's almost instantaneous identification of contacts when your units go out.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I think not.
All right, well, if nobody has any questions right now, then gentlemen, I will bid you a good day and a good evening. I will thank you for your time once again. Tomorrow you will have John with you for the entire day. And you will go over some emulator agile signals, and then tomorrow afternoon start getting into to Pulse Pro streaming and annotations. So once again, take advantage of John's expertise in this field when it comes to programming and whatnot. He did a tremendous amount of work with the Canadian Armed Forces in previous ESM systems and whatnot that we had. So be very beneficial. Again, if you have any questions on anything whatsoever, even if it isn't course related, even if you simply have questions about your upcoming trip to Ottawa or the plan or the program, please feel free to send me an email or whatever, and I can try to answer everything that you might have as soon as I can. I have been sending the links for all of the lessons as soon as I receive them from WebEx. So I hope that you are all receiving those. And if there's nothing else, then yes, I will bid you all a great evening. And I hope you all have a good night. And I look forward to seeing you all when you actually come to Ottawa. This is actually my last day with you for online, so I won't see you now until you've actually arrived here.
Okay. Okay. See you at Ottawa.
Sounds great. We'll see you here in Ottawa. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.